Hello everybody and welcome to this week's webinar, which is it's called Introduction to VBA Part 2. I should just note, I understand that some people who will be listening today may not have seen the first part. That shouldn't be a problem. Having spoken with Todd, it is a continuation of sorts, but certainly it wasn't a necessity to see the first part. However, if you would like to watch that, whether that's after the webinar or not, that won't be a problem. Unfortunately, the recording that we had was in quite poor quality, so we're re-uploading that video in the next 2 days, and you'll find it with the recording of this week's session as well, probably in the next 2 working days. Sorry to have gone off track a bit there, but I just felt that that's kind of pertinent information for everybody. For anybody who hasn't been with Todd before in a webinar, Todd is a real expert with VBA. The last time I was in this situation, I learned probably more than I ever have about VBA. It's an hour, it's quick, there's a lot in here. So if you feel that maybe it's too quick to be able to fully take notes, that's what the recording's there for. Just take it all in as you can, and if anybody needs to study again or kind of repeat any of it, we will have that up, and we will be sending an email out to all registrants in the next couple of days once that's been uploaded. I think without further ado, I'll pass you on to the specialist, since I can't talk as confidently as he can on any of this. Yeah, welcome to Todd.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, James. Just one quick thing. I just wanted to verify. You can't see my screen, right?
Not yet, no.
Let's see. I thought it told me I was a presenter.
Oh, sorry, yes, yeah. I should have made you presenter. That was my short-sightedness.
So how about now? Are we there
yet? I think you need to hit share screen. There we go. Perfect. Great. So I'm going to mute myself. If anybody has any questions, as usual, just pop them in the questions box, and we'll get to them if and when we can. Hopefully by the end we'll be able to answer all of the questions to some degree. So thanks a lot, and yeah, sorry, on to Todd.
All right, so thanks everybody for being here. I've put together some objectives for this webinar. Like James was saying, I already done a previous webinar about VBA, and if you missed that one, you shouldn't have any worries. This is still pretty basic. I think the original one I kind of tried to hit a lot of general high-level concepts just to kind of maybe expose somebody to VBA, Excel VBA that hadn't seen it before, or maybe was dabbled in it a little bit. This is still pretty basic, but I hope it will also be something for those of you who have worked in VBA a little bit. Maybe you'll learn something you didn't know. I think one of the things that I've never forgotten about one of my original mentors when it came to Excel was that it's not what you don't know, it's what you don't know that you don't know, if that makes sense. So hopefully I can clear that up for all of you, and to some degree. I'm probably going to try to move pretty fast here, so just to kind of reiterate what James had said, this will be recorded and viewable in the future, so just remember that. If you're trying to keep up and some of this goes over your head, don't worry about it. I just wanted to make sure there was some robust enough content that when you did go back and rewatch it, you had something you could actually kind of build on. So let's get going here. So here's kind of some of the objectives I've kind of got set for this session, and some of these, I hope I get to all of them, but if we don't, that's okay. I'd rather have more to get to than not enough. So we're going to kind of review the range property. It's kind of one of the basics, and what that basically means is to select or to apply some method to a range, whether that's a single cell in your spreadsheet, or if that's more than one cell, so an entire, maybe a row or a column or even a table range. Then we'll look at how to copy and paste ranges. And then one of the things that I'm most excited to show you is the Debug Print. And this is a great method for helping you as you build your macros, as you write your code, to kind of verify and validate things. And we'll be using what's called the immediate window. And it's one of the greatest tools in Excel VBA to kind of help you do just what it says, debug. So we'll look at that. We'll look at some other things like address, value, and find, and hope to get to row and column. Those ideas of how to count rows and columns, things like that. And then also the end method is very helpful in finding like a last used cell in a range or something like that. And then we may get to variables. I thought I wanted to do that, but that gets pretty deep, and if I want to cover the rest of this, I'm not sure we'll get to that. But if we do, that's okay. But I want to just kind of build on a lot of these concepts in hopes to get to kind of a final demonstration. I'm not sure if we'll get all the way there, but that's okay. So let me get to where we need to be here. So let me get my windows open. So I've split my screen here, and I hope you guys can all see that, because as we go through the VBA, I want you to be able to see both the spreadsheet and my Visual Basic Editor at the same time. If you don't know how to open your Visual Basic Editor, it's really easy. Let me go ahead and expand that right now. So if you go to your Developer tab, you go over here in the Code section, and you click on Visual Basic. But as you can see here, you can also press Alt F11 to open it up. And so that simply opens up this Visual Basic Editor, and this is what it looks like full screen. And you can see our immediate window as I was alluding to before. If you don't see that, you may not. You can actually go to View, and then click on Immediate Window or Control+G. And then make sure, Excel has some of these default projects open. Make sure you're in your file if you were to open a file and follow along, or when you do get around to doing this. And one thing to note, that you cannot use an XLSX file to write any VBA or create any macros. It has to be an XLS file version, or XLSM or XLSB, but for these purposes, let's just keep it simple. It just needs to be an XLS file. So in order to start your first macro, you need a module, and you don't see anything down here with our Microsoft Excel objects. If you click on Microsoft Excel objects in your file, right-click, it opens up this little drop-down, and then as we scroll down to Insert, we'll see that we can insert a user form, a module, or a class module. You just want to click on Module, and now it opens this up for us. And now see we have Module 1, and this is where you can start writing all your sub-procedures or your macros. And the reason I say sub-procedure is that all of your macros have to begin with this sub keyword, and that just stands for sub-procedure. So the first thing I want to do is demonstrate how to use the range object. And so let's go ahead, and I'll type in just a title for my sub-procedure, and I'll just use range demo. And then after that, I need to open and close parentheses. And so that's just the naming method for macro without getting too deep into the technical piece of it. So if I hit enter, it'll automatically insert this in sub. And so in between here is where we write our code. And so the first thing I can do is I can type this keyword range. And so when I open the parentheses, you see the tooltip, much like you may have seen when you use functions in your spreadsheets. So it's asking us for cell 1, and you can use more than one cell in this argument. Remember, I said the range object can refer to a single cell, or it can refer to multiple cells. In this case, what we want to do is select cell A1. So what I need to do is open a double parentheses and type in A1, and then close that double parentheses and close the parentheses itself. Now, in order to select, I type the word select. And you can see here, it already starts to auto-complete that for us. So once you see select highlighted, you could actually hit tab. And so notice here in my spreadsheet that I have cell C21 highlighted. You can see it up here in the name box. So if I were to run this, I can click on run here. It says run sub, or as you can see the hint here, you can actually type F5. So I can do that. We'll run it, and notice now cell A1 is selected. So that's kind of the simplest demonstration of the range object and what that does. So we've told what range A1 by putting that in double quotes, and then dot select is the method we wanted to impose on that. So we could use other things like copy and paste, and we'll get to that in a minute. But let's say I wanted to select this entire row of headers. So I know that's A1 to E1. I would just put a colon in here and type in E1, keep that in between the double quotes, and if I run this again, it will select that entire row of headers there. And again, if I wanted to select this entire table down to E7, maybe I want to do that. So let's just change that and just see it in action. So there it's selected because we've used the select method on that range. So let's go to the next step. Let's talk about copy, because this might be one of the, I mean, I know for me it's one of the most common things that I do when I automate any of my processes in Excel. Is a lot of copy and paste stuff that doing it manually is just so mundane and can be very time consuming actually, cumulatively if you're doing a lot of it. So this is where macros can come in real handy, and they have for me over the last several years. So let's move on from this. Let's go back to just selecting A1. If I go to the next line, hit enter, I can actually, instead of retyping the range in my code, I can just use selection. And that's referring to the range that's currently selected. And then if I hit, or if I type in copy, it will now copy cell A1. So if I run this again, you can see what happens here is you've got this little dancing ants or marquee kind of thing going here that indicates that cell A1 is now copied to your clipboard. And so that's another method there. It's just dot copy. Again, that could have been, we could actually condense that by going copy here. We don't even have to select. But notice something, there's one thing to note. So I've got C11 selected here. Let me hit escape to get that uncopied. So I've got cell C11 selected. So notice something, I don't use the select method, but I do want to copy cell A1. So if I run this, notice that it's showing it's copied, it's currently copied, but it did not select that cell. So cell C11 is still selected. So note the difference there. But you could copy that cell without selecting it. So we can copy that. And let's say we wanted to paste that to cell G1. So we can go, using the range object property again, we can place G1 inside that and then select. And I'm going to go ahead and run this so you can see all of it happen. And so it's copied, it's still copying cell A1, but it's now selected cell G1. And if we want to paste that, what we need to do is use active sheet dot paste. And this is just simple, straightforward copy and paste. There's several different nuances on how to paste, just like you would paste manually in a spreadsheet if you wanted to do values, or if you wanted to do function, or you wanted to do formats. I'm just going to keep it simple and straightforward here, not get too deep into that. So if we run this again, let me indent that. Actually, let me step through. This is another thing I wanted to show you, make you aware of. You can actually step through your code one at a time. Instead of running it one line at a time, instead of running it the full code from beginning to end by pressing F5 or hitting play, you can use F8. And what that'll do is step through line by line. And so let me type F8. Notice that it highlights that first line, the title of the macro. And so what that means is it's going to execute that line when I hit F8 again. So that means it's going to start the macro, and now it highlights the first line. Now it hasn't executed that line where we're saying range A1 copy. That's kind of confusing because I left the other one running. So let me stop. All right, so F8 again, and then notice the first line to copy A1 is highlighted, but you don't see anything going on here. That means it hasn't executed this line of code, but the next time I press F8, it will execute that highlighted line of code. So I can hit F8, and notice right here it has copied that cell. And so I can stop and just go through each line of code step by step by using F8. And notice we just executed this line of code, ActiveSheet.paste, and sure enough, it is pasted northwest to cell G1. And so to continue that, to end it, we'll hit I'm sorry, I got to click on this, F8, and we're done. So that's one thing that can be very helpful when you're building your macros, is to be able to step through the code. One more, while I'm on that, one more little thing to note is you can also set a stop in your code. If you didn't want to step through it with F8 and you just wanted to hit F5, you can actually, in this left-hand side of the editor, on this gray line here, or this gray column, if you left-click, it'll put this little red dot and this highlight the code on that line in red. That means it will stop execution prior to that line. So I'll show you what that means. So if I were to hit play, it'll stop and it'll highlight, just like when we were stepping through at F8, that highlighted code has not been executed. So everything's been executed up to that highlighted line of code. So you can see it actually has copied A1. So that's another method too. As you're building your macros, you can use these methods to kind of step through lines of your code to validate it or make sure you're getting it right before it, or without it executing the rest of your code. So that can be very helpful. And then you just left click it again to toggle. It's just a toggle kind of thing. So, and you can set several stops. So that's kind of a useful little tip there. So the next thing I want to show you guys is kind of one of my favorite things. It's a real simple little thing, but it's extremely helpful, especially as you're just getting started, to kind of help you validate your code as you're building your macros, and especially to debug, and that's using Debug.Print. So let's start another sub here, and then I'll just type sub, and we'll do Debug Print demo. And so the first thing I'll just demonstrate to you, as long as you've got the immediate window in, and again, if you don't have that open and you missed it earlier, you can just go to View here and find find the immediate window, or press Control-G, and it opens that back up for you. I'll scoot this over here a little bit so you guys can see a little bit better. So the first demonstration, this is one of the simplest things, is we just type debug.print, and then if I wanted to print out a string, I could just open double quotes and then close the double quotes, and if I run this, it'll print out hello world to the immediate window. So this doesn't actually do anything in your spreadsheet, but what it does is it allows you to use this immediate window to kind of, again, validate your code and test things as you're going along before you commit to something. And it's extremely helpful. I use it all the time to make sure that I'm doing the right thing, selecting the right ranges and that kind of thing. And I'm about to get to that, to show you why or how that can actually be helpful. So I'll comment that out. And again, if you missed the first webinar, you can make comments by just hitting an apostrophe in front of a line, and you can see how it highlights it green. That just means it won't execute that as code. So I'm just using that to kind of comment that out. So it's still there, but as we continue to write code, it won't continue to print that to the immediate window. So if I hit, if I click into my immediate window, I'll Control A, backspace, clear that, or it'll just continue to add line after line. So how is this valuable rather than just printing out a string to the immediate window? So let's say that you wanted to print the value in cell A1 to the immediate window. So we'll select, actually, I'm just going to copy and paste here, try and keep things rolling along. So if I wanted range A1, and I wanted the value, I can use this value here, hit tab, and that'll tell me the value that's in cell A1. Well, with it like that, it won't tell me anything. But if I put Debug Print in front of that, and I run that, it's going to print out Northwest in the immediate window, which obviously most of us by now know that's what's in cell A1. So say it was cell D4. Run that again. Ursula over here, cell D4. So that's where it can kind of be useful. You might start to see the usefulness of it. Let's say we wanted to find the cell within a table that contained a specific value. Let's say in our table here, we wanted to find the cell that contained a specific name. And I know this is only like, what, 5 columns, 7 rows, 6 rows of data, but just imagine a scenario in which maybe you had 100 columns and you had 3,000 or 30,000 rows of data, and you're looking for a specific cell with a value. Just kind of keep that in mind as I demonstrate this. But let's say, let me comment this out. Let's say we wanted to find within this table the cell that has Michelle. And we know it by seeing it visually. Let's just imagine we don't know it. What I can do is I can use that range, and then let's use the entire range, this entire table range from A1 to E7. And then we'll use this find property to find what we're looking for. If it's a string value, it is in this case, so we'll look for Michelle. We'll put it in double quotes. And then we want the address. So we use this address property. And again, I know this is a lot. I'm moving pretty fast, but hopefully you guys will go watch it again. Let me spell things correctly. That's not going to get what I'm looking for. So again, on this range, we can use find to find a string. This could be a number 2. It could be a variable, but we're keeping it simple. So we're looking for this string Michelle in this range A1 to E7, and what we want ultimately is the address or the cell number. So let's go ahead and debug print this, and then I'm going to Control A, clear this, and then let me run this. And so it prints out C4 to our immediate window, which is the cell in which it found the value Michelle. So I hope you're kind of starting to see the value in that. That's actually a pretty powerful thing. And And so the debug print, just like I said, it's a good way for you to kind of test things out to make sure it's working properly. Or again, if you know maybe you need it to debug things. I used to use message boxes a lot, but the debug print is just far more convenient. It's quicker. So yeah, that's another demonstration. Rather than just printing a string, you can kind of see the value of it now as you're building your macros and working in your spreadsheets. It can really help you out in finding out, is this working correctly? Again, we could do something like, or let me just demonstrate. You can actually use a number. So let's say we have number 5 in this table somewhere, and let me run that. And so C7, and sure enough, it shows us that's number 5. So that's the value inside this parentheses on the find method is just what it's going to look for. And again, that can be a variable as well. But we won't stop and do the variable thing just yet. I don't really want to slow us down on that just quite yet. So again, D6, Edward. So I hope that hope you're getting that. I hope I'm not moving too fast. So one of the next things I wanted to look at was showing you how to use the rows properties to help you find, like for instance, say we wanted to do something like find the last used row of data. Maybe you want to copy and paste all of these names in each of these separate columns into a single column to make like sort of an aggregate column of all of your staff. I don't know how many of you know this by keyboard shortcut, so I could select A2 and I could hit Control-Shift down, and that'll select that entire range, the entire used range. Or I could go over to B2, do the same thing, same method, and it's only going to select the range of cells that contain data, contiguous data. You want to be able to automate this with VBA because, like I said, if you wanted to take this, copy it, paste it to another column here, you can certainly do this with a small table like this because it wouldn't take you that long. But imagine, again, to be able to scale that to some degree, if you had huge spreadsheets you needed to do that, or huge ranges, that could doing that manually could become very inefficient. And so that's the whole point of VBA. So in order to do that, we need to look at another couple of methods like properties like rows, properties like end. So let me get to that. Let's go ahead and move on to the next sub procedure. So we'll hit, or we'll type sub, and I'll do rows demo. So the first thing I want to show you is rows.count. And so what this will actually do is give you a count of all the rows in your spreadsheet. And in order to actually see that, we'll use Debug Print. And it's rows.count. And so let me clear this. And we'll run that. And so this gives me a number, 65,536. So if I go into my spreadsheet, just control down, 65,536 is the maximum number of rows in an XLS file. So it's giving me the number, the row number of the last row in the spreadsheet. And this is actually very, very useful. So let's consider a situation where I wanted to select that range, select that cell, A65536. So you can actually, again, like we've been doing before, select range, and we're going to select A in double quotes, and then we're going to kind of concatenate. So I don't know if you're familiar with how to concatenate in Excel, but it's the same concept here in VBA as it is doing it in your spreadsheet. We can just use an ampersand, and what this is going to do is going to join these values. And so what I'll do is use the ampersand and then type in rows.count, and then I'm going to go ahead and just use select. And so that's going to run that, print that. Let me run that again. And notice it has now selected cell A65536, because as we see here in the immediate window, rows count gives us that number, and if we concatenate that with A, it's going to make cell A65536. And in fact, another way of validating that is type address, and then let's just debug print that. We just run that again. And so again, it's printing out the rows, the count of rows, but here it's printing out the address of the range A concatenated with rows count, as you can see here. So that's just a very useful, I don't know, maybe a kind of a sort of a practical example of how to use rows dot count. So let me move on. So if we wanted to, say we wanted to navigate to the last used cell or last used row of data in column A. One method to do that is to use this same rows count method, but what we'll do is I'm going to copy this. I'm just going to paste it down here and comment these guys out. And then, so rows count dot select. And then again, just to kind of, so I can step through this in a minute, I'm just going to use selection and then do end Excel up. So what this is going to do, it's going to go from our selection, which is going to be the last row, cell A65536, and that dot end with the Excel up argument is going to go up from the bottom all the way to the next cell with data. So it's going to stop. It's kind of the same, this is the same method. This is the VBA method as using the control up. So if I'm at cell A65536, if I press control up, it goes to cell A7, which is the last row in this column that has data. So this is the VBA method on how to do that. And this is, I mean, this is very, very useful, and I'm going to get to that. So let's just step through this. Control F, oh, I'm sorry, not Control F8, just F8. So this gets me down to cell A65536, and if I hit F8 now, hold on, did something wrong here. Not the one. Okay, so let me back up here and try to. Let me try it this way. Huh. I don't see, sorry about that, guys. That's a little random. Oh, I'm sorry. I see what I did. I can't end it there. I have to select. My fault. Wow. Okay, let's try this again. Sorry about that. I was forgetting one little last piece of code. So anyway, I could have used selection, but so range A and rows count is, obviously we've been through this, it's the last row in column A. Then if I use the end XLUp dot select, it will select that cell. I wasn't telling it what to do. I wasn't giving it a method. So you have to type select on the end of that, or it could be copy or any of the others we've looked at. So let me try that. Let me show you how it's going to show you. Breaks it up a little bit. So selection, just so you see. So anyway, range A 65536. We've selected that. Let me step through it again. So we'll select that last row, and now it's back up to cell A7. And so that gets us up to the last used row. Well, let's say while we're at it, what if I wanted to select the cell just below the last used row? I want the first cell that's now available that doesn't have data because I want to start typing data, or I want to paste some data to that. We can use what's called offset. So we'll use selection again, and that's cell A7. And offset allows you to use your selection, your selected range as a reference point, and offset based on an index of rows and columns. So there's two arguments for this offset method. There's the rows index, which in this case, one, a positive number actually moves down rows. So the first argument is the rows index. And so if I type a 1, that means it's going to go down one row. If I were to type a 0, that means it's not going to move any columns. But if I were to type a positive number, like a 1, it would move over to the B column, if that makes sense. And we'll type select here. And so let me run that so to show you what happens. So now it selects cell A8, which is basically using A7 as the reference point because it was our selection, but it's offsetting it 1 row and 0 columns. So if I were to offset this 1, 1, you can just guess what's going to happen. It should land on cell B7. I'm sorry, B8. That's this is the reference point. I'm sorry, didn't mean to confuse you. Cell A7 is the reference point. So offset 1, 1 is 1 down and 1 over. That would be cell B7 if our reference point was B. I can change that. I can run this, and let me go back. So if I have range, my range is now the B column, and I want to find the last, let me step through this, F8. So B, 65536, and then the last used row is 6, so it's B6, and then offset 1, 0 gives us cell B7. So that's another method, the offset. It uses the selected range as a reference point. And that can be super useful as well if you want to use, like for instance, a range variable where you set one range variable and you can use the offset to navigate around however you would like based on that single reference point. So let's look at how to select an entire range. We've kind of gone through using this end XLUp to navigate to a cell. How do we use that to select, say, this entire range or this entire range or this entire range, say, because you might want to copy that and paste it. So let me stop that. And I will, let's see here, let's do a new macro. We'll do select range. And again, you can name your macros whatever you like. It has to be a single string. It can't be, there can be a space. If you needed to, you could use an underscore. Some people do that. And it doesn't have to start with a lowercase letter. I just kind of do that. It's just kind of a method I picked up. I'm not even sure where I picked it up, but it's just kind of something that kind of stuck with me. So let's do the simple thing we've been doing. Let's select a range, and we'll start with A1. And so we can select range A1. If I wanted to select range A1 to A7, I mean, I know what that is by eyeballing it, but what if I didn't? What if I just wanted to go ahead and set some code that selected the entire used range without knowing what that was? I can use range. And notice here in the tooltip again, we've got arguments for cell 1 and cell 2 as a range. So let's use selection, which is A1. We know that. And we'll use that as our cell 1 reference. And then we'll use selection.end XL down. And so let's kind of review. So selection is cell A1. But by placing .end XL down, it's using selection as the reference point to go all the way down to the last used row, the last used cell, which is selection.end XL down, and we know that is going to be cell A7. So we're using that as the second cell reference. So we're now saying range selection, which is A1, to range selection.end XL down, which is cell A7. And we'll select, and I'll run that. Let me click out of that. And so notice it's selected that entire range. So let me kind of back up, because I know this was a little confusing for me to pick up early on when I was just starting to use it. Okay, so we know range A1.select. Let's use Debug Print just to step through this a little bit. Hopefully it kind of solidifies it for you guys. And we'll just go ahead and clear that out. So cell A1 is our selection. So we've verified that. Now let's do this. I'll debug print. Well, actually, yeah, let me copy that. So now I want to validate what is selection.end XL down address. So I'm going to debug print both of those. Let me clear this just so you guys can see it. So there you have it. So selection, the address of selection, A1, we obviously know that, but this is just showing you kind of written out with the selection method. And then then selection.end XL down is A7. So now we can kind of see a little bit better what's actually going on here. So range selection, we know that's A1, and then selection after the comma, selection.end XL down is cell A7. So that's all that's saying. And just be real cautious here with this XL down to make sure you close your original parentheses and then select. So that's a real cool method on how to select an entire range of used cells. If we wanted to, we could have done this. We could have used offset if we wanted to make sure we weren't capturing the header within that. And so offset, remember, 1, 0 is going to be one row down, staying within the same column. So we can run this. And now it's selecting the cells excluding the header, which could be what you wanted if you wanted to copy these cells and paste it into a new column and you didn't want to bring over all the column headers. You wanted one contiguous column of all of your staff without including the headers there. So let me see make sure I'm covering everything. I kind of had some, kind of had my notes on. So okay, so we're getting kind of close to the end of our time. I want to save a little bit of time, make sure there's not anything James has left. But let me go ahead and let's kind of expand on this a little bit. So we'll stay within this. I think we'll stay within this procedure here. And so I can take selection.copy, and then say I wanted to go to range, just like we did early on in the webinar. We'll go to range, G2? Well, we'll do G1. We don't have to worry about headers. And then active sheet. Remember, active sheet dot paste. And so let's run this. And so note right there that we've just taken that used range in column A, excluding the header. Now we've pasted those values into the G column. So what's cool about what you've learned so far is we can actually use what you've learned. We can go to range G1. Actually, you know what? And I'm actually teaching you maybe a little bit of bad habit here, but it's not going to ruin your life. As you learn more VBA, you'll learn this, but a lot of this is kind of actually excessive code using the select and selection, but for the sake of demonstrating to you guys, this is actually pretty necessary just so you guys kind of see it in action. So I'm doing a lot of select where normally I wouldn't, but I just kind of want you guys to see kind of step by step what's occurring here. So we'll take, let's do G1 selection, selection dot end. Offset. I'm just going to kind of take what we've kind of discussed so far and kind of add to this and kind of show you kind of how it kind of come together in some practical manner. Select. Okay, so let me run this again. Now that I've added a couple more lines of code and kind of see what's going on. Okay, so I've pasted that, and now I've also selected that last or that next available row. Actually, I've gotten ahead of myself. So I'm going to keep that code in there, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this. Oh gosh, I don't want to cut it. I want to copy it. Copy this. I'll use B, and then sorry. And then range user distribution. See, that's right. So I've taken some code that I've already typed here. I've copied and pasted it, and now I want to adapt it to column B. So instead of A1 as my starting point, I'm using B1, and I'm going to use this to select just this range of cells. Then I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to paste it to the first available cell in this column. But I'm going to run this entire code, so I'm going to I'm going to clear that so you guys can kind of see it step by step as we kind of add to it. And let's run that. Oh, I didn't hit paste. I got to put that in there. So let me just do this. I can type it. Active sheet. And I hope you guys are able to kind of follow along, kind of building on what I've talked about and see what's going on here. I know I'm moving pretty fast, but again, hopefully you can go back and rewatch it and kind of get more out of it as you rewatch it. So let's run that. And so now you can kind of see what's starting to happen here. I've just used code that I've already typed, copying and pasting. You can start to really build a useful macro here. And I could continue on and do this for each column and add, if you know, like I said, maybe your scenario is you needed to put all these staff names into one single column. It's just a simple little demonstration. But you can continue to copy and paste your code and kind of adapt it. And there's actually a much cleaner way to do this. But again, this is just basic stuff. I just kind of wanted, you get the idea of how to use range and all these different methods: select, copy, obviously paste, offset, end. What are some of the others? The rows and things like that. So that you can start to maybe kind of think about how you can practically use these. These are some of the basic building blocks of Excel VBA, especially the range object, and then how to use different methods and properties on the range object. And hopefully, working through this, I've been able to build up to this kind of this little simple scenario on how to kind of pull all those together. I know we're at about, I don't know, probably about 10 minutes left or so, so I didn't want to I can continue on, James, if you want, or if we're getting close to time, just let me know.
I'm quite happy for you to. I'm sorry about that. Just getting a lot of echo. Give me one moment. Sorry about that, Todd. Yeah, I'm quite happy for you to carry on. There are no questions as of yet. People who would like to answer any questions, you can populate the question section. But I think for now, there's 8 minutes left in it. I think as long as you're happy to continue, that's probably a good idea for now.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so let's just continue on. It's a little bit redundant here, but maybe it helps you guys get kind of a sense of, let me do this. Let me kind of separate these with some comments.
I'm not sure.
So.
You can't hear me? Can you? If anybody could pop into the questions box if they can hear me speaking. I can't hear anything from Todd at the moment.
Oh, I can hear you. I don't know if you can't hear me. I don't think I muted myself.
It's peculiar. Thank you very much. Oh, okay. Well, it seems that I can't hear Todd for whatever reason. But if Todd can hear me, if you'd like to go ahead and carry on for the next few minutes, that sounds great.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly.
Okay, good. Okay. All right, so let me just start to add some comments here to kind of help keep this straight. I don't really need an immediate window right now. So what I've done here is, let's see, we'll add this comment here. And again, this is kind of actually a good point to note or reiterate that comments are very, very helpful, very important to kind of keep your code organized. So that's what I'm going to do here to kind of help you guys. So copy and add first column, copy and add second column, and then basically I'm going to, all I got to do at this point, guys, is just copy and paste this because it's the type of scenario it is. It kind of lends itself to that. So and you'll find that as you kind of develop your VBA skills, if you start to build some macros and things like that, you'll find that there's some a lot of opportunities to do that. Now, actually, in a more advanced skill situation or advanced skills to actually clean this up with a loop, but since that's pretty advanced, we'll just keep it simple and show you how copying and pasting and adapting your code accordingly, like little things like this. You just need to change your range. And again, we could have used variables, but I just didn't want to take too much time on that. That would have been a great demonstration, but I really wanted to kind of get the point across on this method of how to put this all together and make like a single column of all these names. So again, I'm adding another piece of that code, and then we'll see. We'll put all three of these first three columns together, and let me run that. So here, as you can see, we just keep adding more and more because I'm adapting the same code. So once I've written this first section of code, I'm able to copy and paste and adapt that simply by changing my copy range my copy range. So that reference point of that A1 now becomes B1 because I've already done the necessary things here by using the offset method, selecting. All this code is pretty much generic. It's not specific to any one range. It's just using this reference point. And again, the paste range doesn't change. We're still working off of G1 as our reference point, and then using these methods to find the last used cell or the first, actually in this case, the first available cell. So let me just real quick, instead of keep explaining the same thing over and over here. Again, let me try this real quick on this last couple of sections. And then this will be D. And so you can see that in this case, I mean, it takes one little adaptation. You can use the same block of code over and over again, and it gets you what you need. And again, a little more advanced, we could have done this with a loop, and this would have been about, I don't know, 30 or 40 lines less of code, but that's another webinar for another day. So now I think I've got it. I can run this, and now you can see Belinda is the last name there. So we've basically taken every column here in this table, copied all the names in each. Whether they have the same number of rows or not is regardless because of the methods that we've used. It doesn't matter. We've leveraged some of the methods to allow us to take the used range no matter how many rows it is, and we've pasted all those in one contiguous range. So now you have a single column list of all your staff coming from this table here where they were all in different columns, and you've now written a macro that can do that in a matter of just clicking a button. So that's kind of where we were headed for. I hope that was useful for everybody. I know it was very fast, but again, hopefully you can go back and rewatch it and pick some things out and slow it down and take some notes and work through it, kind of code along or something like that. So that's kind of all I had there, James. I finally got to the end. I wasn't sure I was going to be able to do that. But.
No, that's great. We do have a question, actually. I hope you might be able to answer this one.
Okay, I hope I can help.
So Louise asked, can you use a do loop with offset and the copy function instead of typing A1, B1, and so on?
Oh, yes. That's what I was kind of alluding to. This would be, you can use, you can actually iterate through a loop. Yes, absolutely. That's a great question, and that was my point. You can eliminate all these little blocks of code for each one of these rows, and you could just iterate through a loop, and this would probably be about, this macro would be about this many lines maybe if you used a loop. So yes, absolutely.
Great. Another one on loops. Would a loop mean that you wouldn't need to know the furthest right column?
Possible. Yes, you could actually, yes, I can see how you could do that, because you could, especially when you have a contiguous table here, because this would be, these would just be indexed through the iteration of a loop. So say, you know, you set your iteration to start at index 0 or 1, whatever. This would be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Because you have a contiguous row of headers or row of columns, I guess, for your table, yes, that would be absolutely possible, and it would be actually absolutely practical. And if I were doing this in a real-world situation for my own, I would be doing just that.
Great. Then there was one more, which it goes back a few minutes. It's from John. He just said, can we have an example of using a multi-cell range like A3 to F11?
So let me do this. Let's start another one of these. So you could do range. We'll use the range, and then you can, yeah, manually select your A, whatever. What was it? A11 to what?
A3 to F11.
A3, F11, and it's that simple. And you can select. You can do anything. You can copy whatever, but we can do select. And if we run that,
great.
It shows you that range selected. So yes, you can do that. You can use, again, you can use variables. I know I didn't get into that, but the range arguments here can be a variable, and that can be very powerful.
Yeah, great. That's perfect. I think it seems that every question is answered. If anybody has any questions that they haven't managed to get in that they like answering, just send an email to info@webinarsteam.com. That's info@webinarsteam.com. As alluded to earlier in the webinar, we will be sending out a recording of this webinar as soon as we can to everybody who's attended and to anybody who's registered at all. So keep your eyes peeled for that, and you'll be able to take another look. Yeah, I think we shall end it there, but not before I say thank you very, very much to Todd. That was another great session.
Yeah, absolutely. It was my pleasure. I hope everybody learns a lot.
Yeah, great feedback coming through already. So yeah, I'm really pleased about that. Sandy's just quickly put a question in. Sandy, I assume you joined late. Part one, there is not a recording at this exact moment of there's not a recording at this exact moment of part one because we had to remove it because of poor quality, but we will be re-uploading that within the next day or potentially two. They'll probably go up both together, so I'll also put it in the email. Once I've sent out the recording for part two, we'll make sure that we include part one in there as well. And on that note, thank you very much to everybody, and have a really great week. Sorry, one more question just popped in. Marina, will there be more VBA webinars? That's something that we really encourage from you guys. If it's something that you like, then please do send those kind of suggestions through to us, because I know that people enjoy the VBA webinars, and I know that Todd enjoys doing them also. So we'll definitely look into that. So again, just keep your eyes peeled, and the schedule will be updated routinely, and we shall probably look to do some more in the near future. So yeah, for the final time, this will be it. So thanks very much, everybody, and hopefully see you next week. And thanks again, Todd.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Cheers. Bye-bye, everybody.